In Nigeria, the Lagos State Sexual Offences and Domestic Violence Court sitting in Ikeja has yesterday sentenced the medical director of Optimal Cancer Care Foundation, Dr. Olufemi Olaleye, to life imprisonment for the defilement of his wife's niece. Justice Rahman Oshodi sentenced him after he found him guilty of the offense of defilement and sexual penetration of a 15-year-old girl. During the trial of the accused, the convict's wife, Aderemi Olaleye, told the court that the husband had been sexually abusing her niece during her stay with them.
On November 30, 2022, Dr. Olaleye was arraigned by the Lagos State government on a 2-count charge of defilement of a child and sexual assault by penetration. The judge held that the prosecution was able to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt and that all the evidence for the court corroborated that of the victim. We have it. That was him as he exited the courtroom, of course. We're now being joined this morning to discuss this even further by Ibukun Omololu. She's a principal consultant and gender expert, the Teal Tree Company. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Nigeria Police Force says, Lagos State Command says that it recorded 111 sexual assault cases between April and June of 2023 and 5,624 cases of domestic and sexual violence between the 1st of August 2022 and July 31st, 2023. What does this say of where we are as regards protection against gender-based violence, and how can we move forward? We'll come back to the meat of the details of this judgment, but what does this say? Where are we exactly in the fight against sexual violence?
Sincerely, I don't think we've actually made too much progress. In 2015, UNICEF had actually reported that 1 out of every 4 girls is raped every day, and 1 out of every 10 boys are raped every day. So, contrary to the fact that we think it's even perpetrated mostly on girls, it's perpetrated on both boys and girls, meaning everyone is exposed. And sadly, I feel like it's also on the increase because given the statistics that you have actually, read out, and even some of the statistics that increased from 2020 when a case of emergency was declared by the government, it's really been on the increase. And I think some of the things we can do is to be very deliberate about the kind of interventions we bring in to orient and reorient individuals, starting from the family level. The family makes the community makes the nation. And so it's very important that we have advocacy group, NGOs, and even probably the government to make some form of policies to institute this or offer sexual harassment training or education even at the primary or even tertiary levels, because it's super important at this rate.
Oh, well, it's heartbreaking, and like you said, there's a lot more that needs to be done. Doesn't seem like a lot has changed. But I would like also to, talk about in what ways, aside on the government level, as a society, in what ways do you think that, we can help the situation? We're seeing, that there's a lot of commendation for Dr. Olaleye's wife here for speaking up, and being able to, of course, testify against her husband. But as a society, what more must be done? In what ways can we change the narrative by ourselves as a society?
Fantastic question. And I like the perspective you bring about the commendation of his wife speaking up. I tend to look at it in different aspects. First of all, the level of boldness it takes for her to do that, as well as the level of strain that would even have on the relationship. We're talking about a man who's a father, who's a son, who's a husband. So to some extent, there's going to be that strain. So first of all, it would be in the level of stigmatization that we actually, confer on victims or even on their families. One of the reports I had read by Amnesty International, when a little child was raped somewhere in the north. Contrary to people helping her, they kind of ostracized her and kept on pointing like that is the child. And if you look at it, this culture of ostracization and stigmatization is really, really prevalent in the country. And so this is one of the ways that I think we can really do better to support and provide help. Who has checked on Dr. Olalaye's wife? Who has checked on Dr. Olalaye's children or his family or his parents? And those are ways that we could actually bring in support on one level. On the other level, when you look at victims, a lot of these victims, have may actually suffer the impact of rape for the rest of their lives. Some of them actually do suffer physical injuries, internal bleeding, or even vesicovaginal fistula, VVF. And so those are areas that we could also bring in interventions. What are we doing about that, particularly if those victims are young? Then it's to also do a lot of orientation, like I had mentioned. From secondary schools to primary schools about sexual and reproductive health, as well as how to prevent and mitigate this, because the average Nigerian girl sometimes doesn't know how to fend off sexual advances or even harassment. Some people do not even know that they are being harassed because it could be really, really subtle. And so these are some of the ways I think education really plays a big part. And it's something that my organization particularly has been doing, even in the workplace. It would surprise you the level of harassment and prevalence that is prevalent in the workplace, and people do not know how to address that. So it starts from a deep level of education, and then understanding that if this happens, what do you do? How does the average Nigerian deal with rape? Most of the time, we do not want to talk about it. Most of the time, the victims have to hide. And because it is such a heinous and harrowing and violent experience, they literally, want to remove the trace or the whatever reminds them of it. And in actual fact, that's actually losing evidence, because when rape occurs, you actually need to gather evidence. And this is one of the most intrusive search that any human being could undergo, particularly a child. So it really starts from a level of awareness, understanding, education, and bringing that to that level. And then on the other hand, I think there's a lot of intervention we can do for the boy child as well as the men folks in understanding what harassment constitutes. Beyond rape, there's sexual assault, there's defilement, which is what Dr. Olaleye was actually convicted of. There's abduction. What are the differences in all of this? How does someone know what it means to actually fondle or even touch somebody's body parts without their consent, which in actual fact is some level of assault? So it really starts with the education. It really starts also with the rehabilitation for some of these victims and where they need to go. And I'm so glad that there are organizations like the Domestic State Violence Response Team, which is DSV now, CC, Yara Foundation, as well as WARI, the Women at Risk Foundation, who actually help these victims.
All right, thank you very much for mentioning a number of these organizations. I think it's important that we all know these organizations, because at one point or the other, you might have to step in and, call the Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Team or, the Mirabel Foundation or any of these foundations to make a report. You did mention that the first things that people, or the first line of action people usually want to take when they've just been abused is to get rid of evidence, because they don't want anything that will remind them. So I want you to further expatiate on that. A classic case of someone has just been raped. What are the next steps the person should take? So, being that it's going to be such a destructing situation, and I think the kind of support you have around you really helps. And this is what I tell parents to learn as much as possible. If someone has been raped, you try to calm them down, depending on the situation, because it varies. And then you want to try to get the facts and to quickly get them to the place where they have medical attention. From the little I know, this has to be verified. When it comes to forensic tests,
the evidence needs to be gathered in the first 24 to 48 hours. So you want to get that child or that woman, whoever it is, checked. You want to get evidence of penetration, or even if there are traces of fluids, body fluids or semen that is left in her. And that has to be done first before she is cleaned up. And then she has to be able to recount, which is also one of the most difficult and harrowing parts, to recount how or what has happened such that it is, documented properly. Sadly, because of our culture in Nigeria, not a lot of people want to speak up because of what they'll be subjected to. Dr. Olalaye's wife, had to testify against her husband. Even the child, we do not know who she is, would have been subjected to a level of scrutiny and publicity. And so these are very difficult things for human beings to go through. And so it's very important to gather that and to be able to put it in context so that it's something that can be dealt with. And more importantly, I'm glad that Nigeria has the laws on sexual violence has actually evolved a lot from what we had in the pre-colonial times. And so I hope to see that, with different situations, because there'll be peculiarities, that this law is expanded on some more. For example, if we flip this the other way, what if it was an elderly woman who actually assaulted a younger boy? The law still has to take precedence. So I feel like this is very, very important that we look at it both ways, but more importantly, to get rid of the evidence immediately, especially if you are going to make a report. You have to gather that evidence, and that's why it's important to go to professionals such as WARIF, such as Adra, the Mirabel Foundation, because they know exactly how to deal with it. And I say that also because not a lot of victims want to press charges, because we all know the way Nigeria is. You don't know if you will be able to get justice or not. And I mean, I have had some experience with even the law enforcement agents on how they deal with it, and also it's very it's really dicey and tricky. But basically, that's the first thing you need to do.
Very important there. And whilst we talk about some of the measures that people who have just been unfortunately raped need to take, I think it's also important to talk about the role that the society has to play. Osagi had asked the question about this earlier, but I want us to, attack certain behavioral patterns. So, for example, when a woman is being raped and the first question they ask is, why did you go to his house, or what were you wearing? So what are some of the things that we do that in some way encourage rape culture and victim shaming?
Fantastic question. First of all is probably the blame game. When something has happened to a victim, the first thing we do is, what were you doing there, just like you said? Or what were you doing there? Why were you wearing what you were wearing? The fact is that something wrong has been done. And so it's more or less like, who did this? What happened? And it's very important to get the victim to recount as vividly as possible, which is really difficult, because this is, like I said, it's a heinous crime. It's not something I believe any woman would want to go through. So getting even the victim to recount might be a problem. But one of the things we do is really blame. What was she wearing and all of that. And I think that is something that really needs to stop in the society. On another part is the fact that we should stop glorifying sexual assault in a way. For example, sexual harassment is actually conducted on men, on boys. As a matter of fact, I believe that quite a number of men were exposed, probably their first sexual experience was probably from a nanny or a family member. So there's a vicious cycle going on. So in actual fact, I feel like something we need to do is to understand that this is wrong, first of all, because when a child or a man says, oh, I was harassed, some question people ask is, oh, did you not find it enjoyable? Did you not enjoy yourself? Was it not pleasurable? And it doesn't, it doesn't diminish the fact that this is wrong and it was done. So I think it's really having that orientation that this is something wrong and it has been done. And we need to start asking questions like, look, what has happened? Where did it, we need to take some steps and move forward. In some other cases, bearing it up. A lot of victims of rape may never recover. And I feel a big step of recovering, and some would recover better than others, but also a big step of recovering is being able to recount, get a level of justice or redress to some point. In Nigeria, we do not seek redress as much as possible. People cover it up because they do not want to be exposed to the shame. And it's almost like justice is not given to this person, which gives that person some level of closure or help. So it's very important that if we need to prosecute, then we should prosecute or speak up about it. I am aware that there's a sexual offender registry, and it's important for people to report. So if you want to report, please do report. However, I'll put the caveat that it is also a crime to defame or to put out allegations against somebody if it's not true. If it's not true, and it's also punishable by law. And then I think something else that society could do is to provide support as much as possible, not looking at someone like this person is the one that has caused it, but to provide support. How do you rally around this person? How do you help this person? So by not staring or leering or even, probing someone, but just being there for the person. These are things that help them psychosocially and the kind of support they need. And the more we talk about this, I feel like this is something that I have been championing a lot and will continue to do, to continue to orient people and let them know that these are things that we can do better, not stigmatize and ostracize people because of what happened to them. Because in actual fact, rape or sexual assault can happen to anyone.
Fantastic way to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Ibukun Omalolu, for that. And we do hope to see, more wins and more success stories when it comes to cases of gender or sexual-based violence that have made it to court. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.